Jordan Young. She's not here, but she asked me to fill in. So she's the one that I'm taking on the ballot for. Yeah, I'm trying to steal that. I don't know if there's anything else to say. Is there anything else to say? Introduce myself. My name is John Lepine. I'm a second year poet at the MFA program. And we're about to hear from Jay. Jay is a fourth year PhD candidate in English at the U. They work on American literature from the 1880s through 1960s, and they are currently working on a novel about their time in Austria. Jay. Woo!
Thanks especially to the MFA people for inviting someone on my side of the department over. It means a lot. So this is an excerpt from a longer essay called Dildo Dreams, so I don't know how loud I necessarily want this mic to be. I guess, can everyone hear me? Who's here?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. So, a few months ago, I received an invitation to a baby shower that contained a pack of seeds. Baby in bloom. Literal seeds, seeming to sow. I hadn't before encountered such a genuine commitment to an idea this overt and overdetermined. Baby-making metaphors, often metaphors of insemination, conjure sexual imagery just as they work to deny it. And like a packet of seeds, trying, the verb as metaphor, is just one of the many banal euphemisms that allows the most private iterations of ourselves to slip into public consciousness. Heteronormative reproduction is a useful neutralizer when it comes to the murky waters of desire and embodiment. With a little linguistic valence, straight people could be desiring sexual beings publicly without shame. Personally speaking, shame has left me rageful, a sentiment I will return to later. I was talking to my friend Ethan about the straight and less stated dilemma, wherein non-straightness makes visible the reality of sexual desire that the seeds and affiliated metaphors, like the nuclear family perhaps, work to obfuscate. In Ethan's words, coming out at 16 was akin to telling his parents, I like cock up my asshole. Likewise, my gender presentation is an unintentional declaration of my sexual proclivities. I cannot repudiate desire under the guise of reproduction. My shame is legible upon my body. The things you think I do. So I will write to you as I am, a penis-envying, dildo-swinging dyke. And I don't want to write in metaphors. I don't want my sex to flatten into metaphor for the sake of normalcy. The dildo is not a metaphor, even when it acts like one. The dildo is not my shame, even when it is. The dildo is my dick, even when it's not. The ubiquity of dicks within the cultural historical record has been teetering over to the unremarkable, another a priori facet of patriarchy. Is there another word that has as many synonyms and metaphors, or synonymous metaphors, as penis? Off the top of my head, pipe, hose, snake, pole, meat, sausage, package junk, member, shaft, wood, manhood. The cultural obsession with penises is likewise expansive. I think of boys etching dicks into the desks in middle school, or boys sending unsolicited dick pics, or boys getting nailed in the nuts during a soccer match, basking in the spectacle of pain. The hilarity of dicks and their gravity-defying wonder, the terror of the dick, unexpected, resting upon your sleeping face. While penises might be the locus of individual shame, the fact of the penis is hardly shameful. What is high school English, if not the practice of identifying phallic symbols? Hemingway was apparently the first to discover subtext on the basis that Jake Barnes can't get it up. Oh, locus of masculinity, why are you so fragile? Little did I know at the time how devastating this upper thigh wound could prove. If one of the greatest novels in the American canon hinges on the non-functioning penis, I was too attracted to women to get it. Of course, I didn't know that about myself at the time, at least not in such terms. Like so many sad, bright novels, The Sun Also Rises ends on a rumination of a life that could have been. Here, I'll give it to you. Oh, Jake, Brett said, we could have had such a damn good time together. Ahead was a mounted policeman in khaki directing traffic. He raised his baton. The car slowed, suddenly pressing Brett against me. Yes, I said, isn't it pretty to think so? Only now, 12 years after reading those lines for the first time, does my anger ripen into devastation. At the time, I thought, how could you, Brett? How can you hurt Jake like that? I was so angry. I don't think I had before known what it was to be angry at a literary character. Angry at her refusal to deny her desire for a man who loves her as she is. I was angry that Dix could be so desirable. I was angry because I was devastated. And I was devastated because somewhere in the shadow alleys of my mind, I knew that this too could be my fate. If only they had dildos, maybe then this whole terrible situation could have gone differently. I bought my first dildo when I was still deep in the closet. I was with my friend Katie, and we were at some bar just under the Queensboro Bridge on the Manhattan side. We wandered tipsily for a few blocks before I could garner up the courage to enter a nearby sex shop. There were walls and walls of dildos, a dreamscape of vertiginous dicks. Dicks the size of a thigh, dicks shaped like tentacles, dicks curved up and down, dicks vibrating. I'd never been in a sex shop before, nor had I ever been in such close proximity to a dildo, probably because I never really liked sex all that much before meeting my first girlfriend, my first love. In an essay called Dancing with Things, Robin Bernstein describes how our bodies act with objects, and how these objects script us into acting in ways that have come to define social categories, race, class, gender, in relation to the norms dictating how these categories should or should not be performed. Specifying the difference between objects and things, Bernstein writes, things but not objects script action. Martin Heidegger and more recent scholars of thing theory define an object as a chunk of matter that one looks through or beyond to understand something human. A thing, in contrast, asserts itself within the field of matter. She elucidates this distinction with the example of a chef's knife. When an amateur cook uses a knife, it is an object they may barely notice as anything more than a tool to chop an onion, a means to an end. But for a trained chef, a knife is never an object. Rather, each edge of a knife glitters individually with potential and stubbornness, with past, present, and future motions of slicing and chopping. It is something a chef negotiates, and therefore a thing. Thingness, at least in Bernstein's rendering of it, is masculinized and, in my opinion, phallicized. Things assert themselves. They demand to be reckoned with. She repeats, a thing demands that people confront it on its own terms. Thus, a thing forces a person into awareness of the self in material relation to the thing. Like a knife that has slipped and cut your finger, a knife which has leapt up and wounded you, the penis, assertive, bullish, forceful, can leave you bleeding. So might a penis be a thing, the wanton thing which has forced me into awareness of myself as penetrable? Colloquially, crudishly, yes, the penis could be a thing. Or a penis might be a thing in the muted utterance of a child who could hardly say what it is that man wanted to show her. But a penis is not a thing, because things are material objects, not flesh. Dildos are things insofar as they arrange and propel bodies in recognizable ways, through paths of evocative movement that have been traveled before. Daniela, my girlfriend from earlier, laughed and called the dildo a thing while putting it on. It was the same laugh the TSA agents had when they decided to search my carry-on. A laugh I assumed my fellow travelers had when the oily agent held up the disembodied purple phallus. I was hurt by Daniela's laughter, that the enactment of my desire and my shame should be so discomforting and laughable. No, she couldn't stand to wear it. She wouldn't dare dance with it, and vowed never to arrange her body to its shape, to move as it commanded her to move as I desired her. According to Bernstein, stylized bodily performances, triggered by objects, are utterances of thoughts that cannot be expressed in words. Let us recall the knife. Instead of an accidental slip, whereby one enacts a socially determined performance of shock or pain, what if the knife, by your own volition, has been nestled in your palm? What if you, by your own volition, nestled the knife into your own palm? What then of this masochistic tango when the blade glides across the skin? Moving in and out of my lover, the dildo, like the knife, gives symbolic meaning to what cannot be expressed in words, makes legible that which otherwise cannot be. I have made strong proof of my constancy, Portia tells Brutus, giving myself a voluntary wound, here in the thigh. Can I bear that with patience and not my husband's secrets? This enactment of violence upon her thigh, just below her sex, renders her body an epistemological source of her trust. Look, Brutus, behold the evidence of my devotion. But her husband cannot disclose those secrets that torment him. Where blood spills across the stage, in a world where wounds gurgle and speak, Portia's wounds are silent. She dies in silence. Earlier, I said I would return to rage, so I will end, in the space of this current reading, with one of my favorite expressions of rage in all of literature, where the knife, the phallus, the patriarchy all coalesce. When Mrs. Ramsay tells James they can go to the lighthouse on the conditions that the weather is fine and he's up with the lark, the 6-year-old is overcome with the ecstasy of anticipation and love for his mother. But when Mr. Ramsay squanders his son's excitement with the reality that it won't be fine, the narrative tone shifts dramatically. Had there been an axe handy, a poker, or any weapon that would have gashed a hole in his father's breast and killed him, then and there, James would have seized it. The imagined act of gashing a hole into someone's breast invokes a fleshiness, the literal sense of stabbing. And yet, the violence cannot be realized, as it clashes with the metaphorical image that immediately follows. James looked at his father, standing, now, lean as a knife, narrow as the blade of one. Something isn't right. One almost hears the ting of the metal axe or poker clashing with the metal knife blade that is his father. Only by the end of the novel does the imagined stabbing, which has become a refrain, resolve itself. Finally sailing out to the lighthouse with his father, James, after all these years, after his mother has died, after the war, still conjures the mental image of penetrating his father. The text reads, he had always kept this old symbol of taking a knife and striking his father to the heart. Only now, as he grew older and sat staring at his father in an impotent rage, it was not him, that old man reading, whom he wanted to kill, but it was the thing that descended on him without his knowing it, perhaps. Approaching the lighthouse, James could see the whitewashed rocks, the tower stark and straight. He could see that it was barred with black and white. He could see windows in it. He could even see washing spread on the rocks to dry. So that was the lighthouse, was it? No, the other was also the lighthouse, for nothing is simply one thing. The other lighthouse was true too. Only my second girlfriend, the one who captured my heart, understood that the dildo was true too, that it had always been true. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jay. I thought of other things to say. This is a recording, a live stream. Recording of this. Where can readers find those and send them to their family and friends? And
on the Majors and Quinn YouTube page. And this goes for all of the ones that happened before as well.
Also, thank you, Majors and Quinn, for hosting us. And buy a book. I see Citizen over here. If you haven't read that, that's a good one. Gray Langan is a writer from the driftless area of southwestern Wisconsin. A graduate of the University of Chicago, he's currently an MFA candidate at the University of Minnesota, where he was awarded the Winifred Fellowship for Fiction. He lives in St. Paul with his wife, the sci-fi writer Sophie Weirley. Fred.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to be reading the second chapter of the novel that I'm currently working on, called Vaseline. In the first chapter, the only thing that you need to know is that my two protagonists, Danny, who is an 11-year-old girl, and her grandma mom, a 67-year-old woman, strike and kill a possum who may or may not be God on the side of the road and bury it in their backyard. It's not supposed to make sense, so I will start. So Ra. Long ago, God was a beaked Egyptian named Ra. Not anymore, but in ancient times, Ra ruled both the sun and the sky over the Nile River Valley, and at night he moved through the underworld on boats. Ra died each evening in the west, and he was reborn in the east the next morning. Back then, that was a normal thing to do. Miss Lewandowski slid a transparency of Ra onto the overhead projector. Light blasted through the bird god's chest. The teacher bumped the cart, and Ra's head got clipped and shifted by the lip of the blackboard. Ra's scepter shadowed the class crucifix affixed to the wall. Listen, Miss Lewandowski said. This, I am telling you, is the point. I want every boy and every girl to take out a scrap of loose leaf paper and a pencil, and I want each of you to tell me what you know about, the teacher tapped the blackboard with the chalk, about this charming devil right here. Miss Lewandowski pressed 4 fingers to her temple. Quietly, she moaned. We will each of us be thinking our thoughts quietly to ourselves. For the next 5 minutes, Miss Lewandowski walked up and down the rows of desks with a finger pressed to her mouth, on guard against any 6th grade boy or girl who showed even the slightest spark of interest. Satisfied, the teacher returned to the front of the class and pressed her forehead to the blackboard. She kept the big lights off. She whispered incantations into her phone. Take your time, the teacher said to the blackboard. The time that it takes is the time that it will be taking. Danny traced an outline of Ra in profile. The ancient sun god looked upset. Ra's face reminded Danny of the mean junco that lived on the bluff behind her house. His beak looked like a bully's beak. His eyes were scrunched angry just the same. But Ra looked trim and proud and handsome, and he held a farm tool in one hand. For reaping, Danny thought. Plus, Ra probably never chirped. Danny clutched a pencil in her left fist, then carefully, she shaded in the bird god's inner thigh. After several more minutes of uninterrupted silence, the class visitor from the 5th grade raised her hand and shared her Ra facts with the class. Ra was the king of Egyptian gods, she said. Ra turned into a ram at night. Ra was the sun, and in ancient Egypt, the sun was a big deal. The sun was a big deal in regular Egypt, too. A bigger deal than it was in Wisconsin. Ra turned into a dung beetle sometimes, she said. Ra did not get along with snakes. The class visitor spoke with the boldness of a hot air balloon, and so long as she kept talking, her confidence remained afloat. Ra's first name was Ra, but Ra also had a secret name that he kept locked inside his heart and never told to anyone, not even into Mrs. Julian. And if you guessed his secret name, you became a god like him. Isis learned Ra's secret name, and now Isis was a goddess too. That's what you called girl gods. Gods and goddesses are pretty much the same. But not really, though, the class visitor added. I mean, goddesses aren't real, and you're not supposed to believe in them. Miss Lewandowski stared at the class visitor without expression. Her face had lost its shape. She paused a moment to let the quiet file back into the room, then said, Let's all of us practice patience. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I don't want any of us keeping secrets. The teacher looked once more about the room and concluded that the class needed more time. I want to know everything that you know about Ra, Miss Lewandowski stressed. I want to know both his name and his secret name, too. I want to know the things you only think you know. I want, Miss Lewandowski began, but burped an ugly burp mid-sentence, then excused herself to the bathroom. Time opened up like a hole in the wall. Danny wrote Ra's secret name at the top of her paper, and underneath it, she tried to guess his secret name. A possum, Danny thought. She wrote the word down on the paper, then erased it. She wrote the word opossum again, this time crossing the O down to up, to match the O she found in her grandma's books. Then the little girl turned around and showed Koo. Possum, the little girl said, proudly. See, now there's a mind link between us. Koo began to write the word down in his hand, but Danny grabbed his arm. Erase it, she demanded. Do it now. And please, I am only showing you. The boy made the name a dark smudge with his thumb. But what's opossum? Koo whispered into the back of Danny's head. Tell me and don't lie to me. Try not lying just once. I don't do that, Danny said. I never do that. But sometimes you do and you don't even know that you're doing it. No, Danny said. Just say possum, but make sure to say the O like it has a line through it. Otherwise it won't work. What? What won't work? The little girl pointed to her head, then turned around. She explained everything through MindLink. More time passed. Order held until it didn't. The boys took turns at the blackboard spelling curse words and hieroglyphics. The girls whispered spells by the heaters. The class visitor from the 5th grade remained hunkered in her desk at the front of the class. She frowned at her alphabet worksheet. She looked about the room, wary, like a rabbit on cut grass. Meanwhile, modern birds cheeped out the back window. Ra cocked his head to the side and looked into the cottonwood branches. He yelled on the wall. 20 minutes later, Miss Lewandowski returned, her egg face glistening. She walked with both hips to the front of the class. So, she said, what do we know about Ra? The teacher propped a forearm on the overhead projector. Don't be shy. You got answers. I just know it. She uncapped a wet erase marker and gave it a sniff. She summarized the class's wisdom above Ra's head. Egypt, she wrote. Bird beak. Human toes. Snake hat. Mortal sin. Who else? Come on now, who else? Ra ruled the sun, a boy offered. Ra was a king, another girl said. Ra turned into a ram at night. A ram is a boy sheep. Ra was only one ancient Egyptian god out of hundreds of ancient Egyptian gods. Ra was a big one, though. Ra was the biggest one, though. Ra could combine himself with other gods and transform into even gianter ones. Like Pokemon? No, not like Pokemon, like Transformers. Ra lived in a pyramid. Ra, the dung beetle, lived in poop. Scott Wakowiak's whole family lives in poop. Pharaohs liked Ra the best. Moses lived back then too. My aunt lives in Mount Horeb. Our Lady of Lourdes Parish and Elementary does not believe in Egyptian gods. Believing in Egyptian gods is wrong. Believing in Egyptian gods is a mortal sin. Our Lady of Lourdes Parish and Elementary believes that believing in Egyptian gods is a mortal sin. Egyptian gods are almost as bad as golden calves. Sekhmet is Ra's bad daughter and Hathor is his good one. Ra's other daughter had a cat head for a head. Miss Lewandowski walked slow through the rows of desks, pumping each kid for more information. When it was her turn, Danny told the teacher that she knew Ra's secret name, but what it was she did not want to say. And why is that, Miss Lewandowski asked. Danny made hard marks on her paper. Because I don't. You can't just keep it to yourself, Miss Lewandowski said, flabbergasted. That was one of her words. Everything was flabbergasted. The birds outside, the seasons when they switched, Father Reardon, herself after she had too much to drink. Come on, tell us. When you make an observation, you have an obligation. The teacher stood with her arms akimbo. That was another one of her words. Okay, Danny said, but you can't say anything. I don't want Ra to be upset with me. The little girl stood up and whispered the name in her teacher's ear. After she said it, Danny sat back down. The color drained from her face. Honey, Miss Lewandowski said. Sweetie, what's wrong? It's okay. Raw facts aren't real facts. Raw facts are just pretend. Miss Lewandowski burped again. She blinked a few times. She checked her breath on her sleeve. I promise, sweetie, Ra isn't going to be mad at you. Danny put a flat palm on her paper. Then she folded the bird god in two. The teacher pulled the class. Danny thinks she knows Ra's secret name, but does anybody else have an answer? I told you all I don't want any of us keeping secrets. 20 hands grabbed at the air. Danny gripped tight to the edges of her desk. The class guessed for 5 minutes without catastrophe. The class visitor guessed wrong twice, then asked to be excused. Ra's secret's name's a secret, Danny said to Koo through MindLink. She shouldn't make me say. Why does she want to know so bad? Danny shook her head. Ra's secrets are supposed to stay secret. She shouldn't have made me say. Koo raised his hand, but Danny turned around and stared at it until he brought it back down. Suddenly, the lights came on. Ra disappeared. At the door, the class visitor stood with the vice principal. Miss Venable stepped to the front of the class. Donna, Miss Venable said, a word. Ancient civilizations ended in the gym. Miss Venable found a whistle and blew it, and then the 6th grade children ran laps around the court like Ra, ancient sun god, creator of heaven and earth, turning day into night, night back into day, dying and then coming back to life. But what did we do, Danny asked Koo through mind link. But Koo kept his head down, kept his short bory legs pumping, and so the answer remained a mystery.
Thanks again, Greg. Let's take an 8-minute break and come back. That puts us back at 5:43. See you then. I appreciate that. Natalie is the coolest person in the world. She is the funniest. Anything bad that happens to her makes her even more sexy and mysterious. She has journalism published with the Chicago Reader and WBEZ, creative nonfiction with Pigeonholes and Offing Night, and a fable published with Between Cities. Her work swirls around faith, family, feminism, and forgiveness. Natalie.
Hello, friends. I did not print out my readings today, so I'm reading from my computer. So this is also a very brand new piece. 1 second. I need to put this on the ground. Okay. So I really wanted to read something that is exactly what I'm feeling right now. So I finished this piece like 2 hours ago. And it's about, well, I'll let you find out what it's about as I read it. Let's do that. So, yeah, okay. Some experiences feel too sacred to share, but I still want to give this a try because I'm experimenting with being honest with people about the details of my life. But the struggle with sharing what I write is what can I bear to have misunderstood? That's also the hope, right? If you understand, you will all know me better. My roommate Nikki is in the back there. She told me there's a such thing as learned hopefulness. So I want you to imagine a sparrow nestled into your palms. I want you to imagine after you spent all this time luring it there with seeds and berries, it's finally made itself comfortable. It's falling asleep. Just as its little eyes close and its chest puffs with breath, you take your thumb and forefinger and snap its little neck. This is a metaphor for my ex-boyfriend sexually assaulting me. The severity of his crime depends on what state you live in. Some states considered what happened to me successful rape. Minnesota considers it an attempt, which you might think would make me feel better, but actually it just makes me feel a little more confused about the whole ordeal. And naturally, as a consequence of this, I don't have a very easy time trusting people, but I'm trying to practice trust. I'm trying to practice what it's like to live in a world where men don't see you as a thing to use. And naturally, the best course of action for this is to live in a house of 10 people. As this is the first draft of this piece, I didn't write an exposition to this essay. I just want to give you some spark notes that last week was an actually awful week, and I had 3 stellar nights of imagining and ruminating on all the ways my ex-boyfriend could have assaulted me in ways that would have been much less confusing than how he ended up doing it. So by the time Sunday comes around, I'm emotionally exhausted. And then last week on Sunday, we have Brian Bademan come over for dinner. He is the nice man who runs Anselm House, which is the program that keeps my rent cheap in this house of 10 people that I live in, because I live in a Christian community living home. It's not really the night to be messy, but this is also a night where I'm vomitous in my need to cry. The other thing that you need to know about this is that I am on dishwashing duty this night. My dishwashing buddy in my house of 10 people is my roommate, Jan Lo. Jan Lo loves doing the dishes, and I love and accept this about him. Doing the dishes is the most admirable quality a man can have. Bar none. Jan Lo washes every single little fork and every single little spoon so carefully and tenderly, and you watch it and you wonder how it is someone can have so much patience and kindness with this menial little task. But then, when you're me, at this emoting capacity, and you're watching this man scrub every tiny fork tine, you're not really focusing on how sweet and kind this is. You are instead like an Australian shepherd dog, watching a flock of geese land in your backyard, just like, let me out, let me at them, let me chase them all into the pond at once, please. I was low-key tweaking on Sunday night. Everything is fine. But the third thing that you need to know, the second thing that you need to know about Yanlo is that he is a therapist who specializes in sexual trauma. So during this whole dinner, I'm trying really hard not to be vomitous in my crying. I'm zeroing in on this little bracelet that he's wearing. It's one of those little rubber wristbands that says sexual assault awareness on it and has a hotline number on it. I'm watching Yanlo's sexual assault awareness wristband, and I think that detail is going to be really cool when I write about this later. But right now, I'm like a little bit annoyed about the tiny parallelism of it all. And I also have to apologize to you guys because I just deceived you. I did not think that at all. I just lied to you to make a little joke. The truth is, when I looked at that wristband, really all I was thinking was, there is somebody here who might understand what I'm feeling without me having to explain. And the truth is, when I looked at that wristband, all I thought was just the word please. The thing that's complicating this is that Yanlo and I aren't exactly like friends. We're friendly, but we aren't that close. So I didn't know if this is an appropriate thing to bring up to him because I don't really like to inflict my brain onto other people. To an extent, this makes me actually kind of avoid Yanlo because I don't want him to have to go into his therapist work mode with me. I want us to have a normal friendship and not one that's me being his client. So my goal was to get through the dishes as fast as possible and vanish. I wanted to use our tiny dishwasher, and this is anathema to Yanlo, but I knew this, and I didn't care because I am mean. I opened it up, and I said, Yanlo, you can do the bowls to your heart content, but can we please use the dishwasher on the plates? In a way that's not actually asking. This wasn't a request. And Yanlo was a little bit kind of slightly taken aback, but he replied, I can do these if you need to go. I can see that you're upset, and if you need to go feel what you're feeling by yourself, it's okay. I won't hold it against you. I actually really like doing the dishes. It's menial. It makes me feel important to do it. And I desperately, more than anything, did not want to be by myself. I really just wanted a witness to my sadness. I didn't want to ask him to witness me either. So in my indecision, I started just running my hands on one of our rattier dish towels over and back as if I could just iron all the pebbly knobs out. And right on cue, as I'm thinking this, he says, or you can stay here and cry. You don't need to pretend to be happy. So I pick up this towel and I start mopping off one wet chili bowl at a time. I stack them on the drying rack. I'm just crying. I pick up another bowl and I dry it off and I stack it, just continuing to dissolve. While behind me, everyone else in my house of 10 people are in the living room singing like Be Thou My Vision and Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing. My roommate Tate is on his homemade organ. My roommates Jenna and Josiah are on their violins. My roommate Tyler has this cackling laugh that's just like cutting through the air to me. And all of this happiness is just spewing out of this door that I really want to close now. And it's not because I'm scared of my roommates seeing me cry, because first of all, they have seen me cry on multiple occasions. And second, I knew I was signing away my privacy when I joined this commune. I really just wanted the door closed because I was really tired of being a total buzzkill in the middle of everyone's joy. But my roommates Lynn and Casey are going in and out, and they're helping us put away the leftovers without a word, pretending like they see nothing, which I really respect. And I also don't want to stop them from offering me this specific form of love either. And in this moment, Yanlo adds, very perfectly, like a therapist does, it's hard to be sad when everyone else is singing and laughing. And you know the kind of crying where your head feels like a wet sponge and you think you've wrung it out, but you just press it and a new wave of water overflows? I was just so grateful that I had this person who just knew. One of the things that people always say when you have your little traumatic crying jags is they ask, are you in therapy? And I know they mean well, And I really get it because sometimes you need that little push. But it's also really different when you have to outsource all your emotions to somebody who you pay to love you. It means so much more when you have a friend who can offer to carry your sadness with you. For the duration of these dishes, I could just let it out. And Yanlo didn't just tell me thank you for sharing. He didn't just sit silently. He is an actually good therapist and asked me questions. And he offered little synthesizing comments. And when my crying got too big for me to talk, he did a nice thing and waited for me to let some of it out. And at this point, we have a pile of damp plates stacked up on the drying rack. I have a wet towel that I'm wringing out and reusing because I don't want to leave to get another one. So all these glasses are just streaked with water droplets and smears. And the question I've actually been wanting to ask Yanlo for 2 months presses against my skull, and it's just drumming at it. I'm fussing with our teacup spoons with these little ornate leaves on the handles, trying to stack them up as perfectly as I can muster until I can get the courage to spit out, am I going to be sad forever? Because behind it is this. I am full of an interminable grief. I feel like I'm doing something wrong because I am full of interminable grief. I feel like I'm failing at recovery because I am still full of interminable grief. And when you're vulnerable with people, they become unguarded with you in return. You start to see the purest parts of them. I watched my roommate drop any sense of irony. All the little lines around his eyes relaxed, and he looked at me open-faced. He said sincerely, straightforwardly, well, according to the research, no. And that response gave me the kind of relief that unspooled my spine. But then Yanlo followed it up with this. Maybe it's cynical of me. I also don't believe in prosperity gospel. I don't think anywhere in the Bible does God promise us a happy life free of suffering. All the people we look up to in the Bible suffered pain. And maybe you might think this undermines the relief, but really, honestly, and truly, deeply, it made the relief feel real. It gave it this extra dimension. Because I think there's this idea that if you're not happy, then you're ungrateful. If you're not constantly singing praises to God, you are bad. No matter what I am going through, I should be in the living room singing hymns with my roommates, not crying over a wet dishcloth. And to this, then I ask myself, isn't it proper for me to feel deep, abiding sorrow for that which has been done to me? The fingening, the way I was rendered into object with my body and myself split apart. Isn't it godly for me to grieve this? Which is the question I've been asking for the past year, which is not really a question. My ex-pastor told me sometimes when you pray for God's help, God reveals himself through his people. And I think everyone who's passing familiar with my roommate Yanlo might just think of him as this guy who doesn't wear shoes anywhere and makes esoteric jokes and loves the Korean national anthem. But I really need you to understand that sure, these are true things about him, but also in that moment, he was the face of God for me. And there's this verse in one of the books of the Gospels, because I'm not someone who memorizes scripture, sorry. But the lines Mary stored up all these things to treasure them in her heart. And I store up all of these things, where I store up a moment when I went sledding with my friends, and when I started slipping down the icy hill. My roommate Casey lifted me over the edge back to level ground because I couldn't get back up by myself. And I store up the time I was sad over the summer, and my roommate Jenna sat with me for half an hour, praying with me in her car. Even when I was supposed to be helping her move and put all of her clothes in her closet. I store up the time I came home and I watched my roommate Josiah just running by with a dog we were watching, with the dog's leash tied to his belt so they could both run freely. I just have those memories because they make me happy. That memory of Josiah's him just being exactly who he was supposed to be. I treasure all these things up in my heart so that when I'm falling asleep, I can think about that love instead. I've met God at my kitchen sink. I've met God in a quilted bed, in an armchair in Powderhorn Park. I've met God over a splintered wooden floor. The same God who guided Hagar in the desert, the same God who met the woman at the well. I know the God who sees me. Thank you. Because I want you guys to know I'm okay. So last week I was really tired of, you get like just screen fatigue. You just get tired. Like I can't stare a second at this LED. I have this pack of fun glitter gel pens that I use when I get there and make like zine poems. And I drafted a lot of random stuff. And one of the things in my house of 10 people is I live with all these med students and we have these heart coasters. So I just started drawing this picture of a heart and I started to just kind of draft around it. And this piece came out that I haven't edited, that I'm just sharing because it's fun. And it's called Ode to My Heart. You will continue to beat for a full minute after I die. Removed from my body, you will keep going. My brain KOs, you will punch blood through my arteries and keep my lungs afloat. You are the one thing I can never control. That's the end.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of Mill City. We'll see you back in January. One more round of applause for the readers. And thank you again, Majors and Quinn, for hosting us. Have a good night and see you in January.